Tēnā koutou. O tira tēnā tātou e te pirenga whare. Nei rā te mihi atu, ki a koutou katoa. Ka tuku atu te reo pōhiri, ki a koe e te minita, te honore nanaia Mahuta. No mai, haere mai, ki runga I te karanga o te rā. Nei rā te reo o mihi, o whakamihia ki a koe, kua tai mai nei ki te tautoko I te kaupapa. Kei te mihi, kei te mihi, kei te mihi. Ko ingarangi te whakapaparanga mai, engari, e whānau mai o I Aotearoa, ko Turtle Island, Canada, te whenua tupu, ke tamaki o e noho ana, he paiwai whakako naio o I Waipapa, tō Mataro, ko Angela Wilton, aho, huri noa ia tātou, tēnā tātou, katoa. Greetings, greetings, greetings to everyone here, and welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Angela Wilton, and I'm from the University of Auckland, Waipapa tō Matarau here, and I have the privilege of both welcoming and introducing our keynote speaker this morning, Aotearoa's Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta. Minister Mahuta brings to her portfolios an interconnected approach to the complexities of both the global and the local. Indeed, dynamics which the development sector has grappled with for decades. Minister, I extend our thanks and our appreciation to you for joining us at this event. Guests, friends, and colleagues, please welcome our speaker, the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta. Kia ora.
Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara kitai, e hi ake ana te ata kura he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei mauriora. E mihi ana kia kouta katoa e tāpiri nei ki tēnei o ngā huihuinga tangata, tēnei wānanga, kia aro atu ki te pairangi ki ngā kaupapa e whai ake nei tātou katoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you to Angela Newton and the University of Auckland for hosting this DevNet conference. I'd also like to acknowledge participants joining virtually, and in particular our Pacific whanaunga linking in from the conference hub in Suva and across Te Moananui Akiwa. To those participants able to attend in person, I'm sure every opportunity will be taken to share insights and perspectives on locally led development. I want to share some views about how I see Aotearoa New Zealand and how we support this approach, drawing on a few examples from our region. This is a challenging time, and when we consider the cascading impact of a global pandemic, climate change, crisis and conflict, we need to find ways to navigate ourselves through these troubled waters. And I want to share my own perspective on how a locally led approach can and will enhance our partners' responses to these external shocks. The title of my address is He Waka Eke Noa, we're all in this together. In this context, our destination is a peaceful, stable and prosperous Pacific. Our navigation chart requires us to collaborate, innovate, adapt and transition to meet the various challenges we encounter towards our destination. And that journey requires resilience. Locally led development is at the heart of Aotearoa New Zealand's Pacific resilience approach. We're committed to supporting the development priorities of our Pacific partner countries and, wherever feasible, delivering our support through local actors, civil society and NGOs. This approach recognises each country's inherent mana and ownership of their sustainable development process and resilience journey. We commit to being flexible, to being adaptable, and to being a partner that Pacific countries really want to work with. This is a change in stance to ensure that we're responsive, listening, understanding country context, and looking for ways to enhance our partnership and continue to improve. We really do want to move beyond the donor-donee mentality. I appreciate that these are not new or provocative ideas for this audience. Our real challenge here is consistently putting this approach into practice and consistently addressing our partnership approach and its shared objectives. Over the past years, international borders have reopened and we've been able to reconnect with our partners on the ground. I've had a chance to experience examples of locally led development firsthand. The first example of success that I'd like to share is the major aviation infrastructure renewal at Hainan International Airport in Niue, currently being implemented by Downer. Now a large-scale infrastructure project being delivered by a New Zealand firm may not sound like an obvious example of locally led development. In fact, in small and remote Pacific countries, there often isn't easy locatable experiences. There often isn't the local expertise to fully implement big projects like this one. However, Downer is making a concerted effort to upskill the Niuean construction workforce through their recruitment and training. I did have the privilege of meeting the team there and can say with confidence that the focus on building local capability will sustain the benefits of this activity far beyond our funding and the completion of the project. Direct advantages have been upskilling local workforce, some of whom have gained bespoke skill sets in that industry, a greater appreciation for in-country context, especially of the Downer workforce from New Zealand, and with this insight, a better disposition to integrate cultural nuances into the operating environment of Downer that works better and alongside Pacific partners. A key aspect of locally led development is ensuring we're supporting local partners who promote inclusion in their communities. The Pacific Feminist Fund is a newly established Pacific-led women's movement. They promote gender equality and women's empowerment in the region by seeking to amplify the voices of leadership of local women's movements in Pacific countries. In most cases, local women's organisations will be the most powerful advocates for legal and policy change that advances women's rights in their communities. And Aotearoa New Zealand is supporting the Pacific Feminist Fund to mobilise resources and strengthen the network of women's movements across the region. I'm mindful that the more we do as a country to support sexual and reproductive health, women's leadership and empowerment, education of women and girls, and advocacy against gender-based violence, then the potential of women to transform their societal norms through greater participation can be achieved. So how do we connect this locally led kaupapa to the troubled waters that Pacific countries currently face? While the COVID-19 pandemic is still an ongoing reality, with almost 3 years behind us, this conference is a good opportunity to reflect on what we've learned from the pandemic and how our international development program responded. I want to acknowledge the personal commitment of our partners showed during COVID-19 as well. In spite of closed borders, disrupted supply chains and other restrictions making your work tremendously difficult, you've continued to deliver. Nō reira, e mihi ana kia koutou katoa. In response to the pandemic, Aotearoa New Zealand contributed a major package of support for Pacific countries, spanning their health, social, and economic responses. I won't list all the details here. I'd like to focus on 2 programs that preceded the COVID-19 pandemic and were able to effectively adapt and respond because of their locally led approach and the partnerships they had established. The Polynesian Health Corridors program, which is delivered through the Ministry of Health, is built upon partnerships of trust and collaboration with departments and ministries of health in the Cook Islands, Niue, Tokelau, Samoa, Tonga, and Tuvalu. The program's priorities are determined by the health leaders of participating countries. As soon as the pandemic struck, the team worked closely with these officials and pivoted to deliver vaccines and technical support for their rollout, testing equipment, and public health advice relevant to local contexts. This approach has supported Polynesian countries to lead their preparations for and response to COVID-19. A funny aside, when I was in Niue, one of the innovative ways that they got everybody vaccinated was to have a village vaccination competition, and it really got everyone focused on getting out to get vaccinated. I saw this and other examples during my trip in the Cook Islands in October. I had the opportunity to meet with staff from Te Marae Ora in the Cook Islands Ministry of Health, who have been the front line of the Cook Islands COVID-19 response. As I'm sure you're aware, COVID-19 had a huge impact on Pacific small and medium enterprises. The Pacific Link program supports Pacific SMEs through a locally led approach. It strengthens the capability of local business advisors and builds networks that connect Pacific SMEs to those business advisors. The advisors provide tailored support to businesses across a wide range of services, including digital transformation, accounting, and marketing. We've adopted this approach because local advisors have in-depth knowledge of the challenges that SMEs in their communities face, as well as the cultural and relationship skills that will make their advice effective. Through the program and a complementary Pacific SME finance facility pilot, Aotearoa New Zealand has supported over 1,800 Pacific businesses in 8 countries. When the pandemic struck and borders closed, in most cases, our only option to support responses in partner countries was by working with and through local partners. Now that borders are reopening, our challenge is to foster and build on those examples of locally led approaches that have worked. And I'm determined that we will use the lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic to strengthen how we work, and that will not just return us to business as usual approach, but actually bring forward the real learnings from COVID-19. You'll probably be aware that there's been increased attention on the Pacific from major powers outside the region. I'd like to briefly consider the role that development assistance plays in this broader issue. In public commentary, aid funding is sometimes portrayed primarily as a tool that large external powers use to buy influence. This narrative minimises the ownership by Pacific countries of their own development priorities. We are, each sovereign nations, standing in our own mana, able to set the terms of engagement with our development partners. It is critical that we reflect on that and ensure that Pacific priorities are at the centre of our thinking, and that's a change in perspective that I bring to this portfolio. There are plenty of examples of Pacific countries setting their own terms of engagement. We can see a vision for the region in the 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent agreed at the Pacific Island Forum Leaders meeting earlier this year. Vanuatu's former Foreign Minister, the Honourable Ralph Regenvanu, gave us a compelling message about how development partners should work with Vanuatu at the 2020 DevNet conference. His keynote address and my own engagement with my Pacific counterparts make very clear that Pacific governments rightly expect development partners will align support to their development priorities. Aotearoa New Zealand has an important role to play in supporting Pacific partners and reinforcing their development priorities. For example, we're a committed long-term supporter of initiatives that develop and use Pacific-owned and led data and evidence, such as the Pacific Communities Pacific Data Hub. The types of projects that we deliver also matter, and I want to highlight the role of budget support in our mahi with Pacific countries. Budget support is a high-trust form of development assistance that empowers Pacific governments to deliver on their priorities. Greater geostrategic competition remains an important and multifaceted challenge for the Pacific region. Effective development practices are one important response, and we can lead by example in supporting our Pacific whanaunga. Climate change is the defining global challenge of our time. Yet effective action, both in Pacific and further abroad countries, will require local solutions. While visiting Tonga in August, I launched the Aotearoa New Zealand International Climate Finance Strategy, Tuia Te Waka Ākiwa, an outline of how we plan to deliver high-impact adaptation and mitigation initiatives to operate at scale, leverage funding from a broader range of sources, and strengthen partnerships. The strategy affirms the importance of localised solutions, reflecting that many communities and especially village elders have been adapting to living with changes in their natural resources and environments for decades. In delivering our climate finance commitment, we place a great value on Pacific and other developing country cultural frameworks and the role of Indigenous knowledge, their mātauranga, to address climate change. We'll continue to incorporate these factors into the design and delivery of our climate finance initiatives and promote the deepening of relationships between communities, researchers, and policymakers. And in fact, when I was in Fiji, I saw a real example of this in a sanitation project for a small village. Across Te Moana Nui Ākiwa, we're working to improve climate forecasts and early warning information to communities by incorporating local knowledge to ensure information is relevant, and so communities know what actions they need to take. Whether it is acute events like flooding or a more slow-moving crisis like drought, quick action can make a significant difference to lives and livelihoods. There's a lot more mahi to do in this area, and I am excited by the opportunities that our major scale-up in climate finance provides to strengthen our support for locally led climate solutions across the Pacific. And I'm also mindful that we can use our commitment and approach as a means of leveraging partners into this space, again, to reinforce the value of a partner-led approach. It won't always be easy for Aotearoa New Zealand to deliver a locally led development program, and I acknowledge that. It requires our government and MFAT to relinquish some control, except that we won't have a single plan for what we deliver, and perhaps most importantly, that we need to spend more time listening to our partners and co-designing initiatives that will be driven from the ground up. Innovation also brings an element of risk, but risk also brings a more divergent approach to addressing some complex challenges, so the two go hand in hand. The range of examples I've spoken about today shows that locally led development can take very different forms. So in closing, I want to leave you with a well-known saying from Mairohi of Waikato, we're a river people. Hoia tō waka kia kotahi anō te kōkiri. Paddle your waka and let your paddles strike the water in unison. In this context, it reminds us that we need to remain in sync, aligned, mindful of each other as we head towards our common destination, a peaceful, stable, prosperous Pacific. We're indeed in the same waka. Each of us brings valuable skills, experience, knowledge, and perspective. Our paddles, when moving in unison, striking the water at the same time, reflect our shared purpose, and it will help us steer through troubled waters to get to our destination. O te rā, ka whakakapi I tēnei kōrero I roto I te nākau tapatahi, me te whakaro nui, mā te mahi ngātahi ka tutuki te kaupapa, mā te manawa nui, ka taia ki te pairangi e whai ake nei. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.